The shocking scale of sexual harassment in our schools. Students speak of a culture of sexual bullying where so-called sexting is commonplace and teachers often fail to act.
There are real new dangers. It's not that young people are different from the way we were, but the world has changed so radically.
Also tonight, the 6-year-old found dead 20 years ago. Today, a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder.
No-brainer how keeping fit is helping more men beat dementia.
Cells in Britain's cells cracking down on mobile phones hidden in prisons.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. An alarming picture is painted today of life in Britain's classrooms, a world where sexual intimidation and bullying is rife, where so-called sexting is commonplace, where pupils are sometimes too afraid to speak out, and where teachers often fail to act. A children's charity has told ITV News the number of youngsters seeking help has increased almost fivefold.
Today, MPs launched the first investigation of its kind into the scale of the problem, with concerns that some schools and teachers are simply ignoring it. Our social affairs editor, Penny Marshall, reports.
Say, if your bra got undone, they tell them to sit down, stop messing around, do your work, and then it wouldn't get reported anywhere else.
Undoing a girl's bra, that happened, but I don't think the girls went to the teachers.
The spotlight has now fallen on schools after researchers found many pupils say sexual violence and harassment are commonplace within them.
Boys would come up behind you, they'd try and grape you, they'd ping your bra, and I was not happy about it.
Rosie from Wales found herself victimised at her secondary school when she was only 12.
There is a lot of it going on. It's just very hidden, and no one is very aware of it, especially teachers.
This parliamentary inquiry will now establish the scale and impact of the problem in schools, as well as exploring solutions.
I think when you look at the pressures that young people are under today, whether it's from sexting on mobile phones or being able to access pornography online, it's unsurprising that perhaps the pressure on their behaviour in schools is changing as well. What I want to do through this inquiry is to make sure that we create safer spaces in schools for children to learn effectively.
When the helpline Childline was launched in the 1990s by the campaigner Esther Ransom, peer-on-peer abuse was hardly discussed. Now she tells me the problem of sexting alone has brought more than 1,000 calls.
Young people contact Childline online as well as by phone and are desperately concerned about the pressures they face. I think there are real new dangers. It's not that young people are different from the way we were, but the world has changed so radically.
And she says it could be time for a new helpline.
We know there is a cohort of young people who can't even reach out to Childline because they feel so ashamed of what they've done. And I would like to explore the possibility of setting up a new resource. I'm calling it Is It OK?
There are things called loud points.
Today's inquiry is being launched because MPs believe the problems are so widespread they're blighting the lives of a generation of children in our schools. Penny Marshall, ITV News.
A man is being held by Cambridgeshire police tonight on suspicion of murdering a 6-year-old boy more than 20 years ago. Ricky Neve disappeared near his Peterborough home in 1994. His body was found in nearby woodland the following day. The arrest followed an appeal from his mother for detectives to reopen the case. Ben Chapman has more.
Ricky Neve was just 6 years old when he was strangled to death while walking to school. For more than 20 years, whoever killed him has got away with it. But this morning, his mother, Ruth, who's lived under suspicion herself for most of that time, and her new partner were told a man had finally been arrested on suspicion of her son's murder.
We understand what a big step it is for the police to do what they've done today. It's a bit like when they actually reopened the murder investigation and told us that. We're just still a bit numb and shocked. It's just come completely out of the blue.
It was November 1994 when police discovered Ricky in Woodland, just a 5-minute walk from his home in Peterborough. He'd been strangled with his own clothes. It took police just a day to find his naked body here, but in the 21 years since, nobody has been brought to justice for his murder. 2 months after he was found, his mother was arrested on suspicion of killing her son. She was cleared by a jury the following year, but served 7 years for child neglect. In 2013, she began a campaign to find her son's murderer, and in June last year, the police agreed to reopen the case.
I feel very overwhelmed, and I don't think this is a time for celebration. I just think it's a positive step in the right direction.
10 months on, Ruth was too emotional to speak today, but her partner Gary, whose research helped to reopen the case, welcomes the progress the police have made.
This is getting Ruth something that I promised her when we first met, and she told me about the whole thing, and I promised her then if I couldn't do anything else, I'd give her one thing that nobody else has ever given her, and that's justice for her and Ricky.
That day hasn't come yet, but they say today's arrest proves police are taking Ricky's murder seriously, even after 21 years. The man the police arrested this morning is from Peterborough. He's in his 30s. Now, this was a crime that was committed more than 21 years ago. They say he was a teenager when Ricky Neve was murdered. Even after all this time, he is being questioned about it tonight at a police station in Cambridgeshire.
All right, Ben, thank you very much indeed.
The head of the Vote Leave campaign today set out his vision of a Britain outside the EU. Justice Secretary Michael Gove said the country would thrive in a European free trade zone with none of the current restrictions. He accused the Remain campaign of treating voters like children, but it said his plans would put jobs at risk. From Westminster, here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
Outside the headquarters of the Leave campaign this morning, a stunt by the opposing side.
It's the lack of a plan, you see.
They handed out a mock document in which each page was blank, apart from a pair of crossed fingers. So as a leading face of this campaign, Michael Gove's job today was clear. Spell out what would happen if we left the EU and respond to the Chancellor's claims we'd all be so much worse off.
The In campaign want us to believe that all the terrors of the earth will be unleashed upon our head. It treats people, I'm afraid, like children.
But he was subsequently guilty of doing just that. If we stay, he said, Europe will want the rebate back. They'll ask for more powers and we'd be constantly outvoted.
We're not settling for the status quo. We're voting to be a hostage, locked in the boot of a car, driven by others to a place and at a pace that we have no control over.
To get control, Michael Gove says the UK would be part of a free trade zone. It's not the single market in dark blue we're currently in, but nearly all countries in Europe, the light blue ones, have some sort of trade deal with the EU. It allows them to trade some but not all goods without paying tariffs. However, it does not apply to the service sector, which makes up almost 80% of the UK economy.
You've just said, and I'll use your words, we would have full access to the single market but be free from the regulations. Can you name me a single other country that has its cake and eats it?
Well, Britain is in a unique position.
So the answer then was no.
The Leave campaign have admitted today that Britain would be outside the single market. Well, that's a huge risk for jobs, for investment, for trade.
But Michael Gove said those scare stories from his opponents were treating people like children. So we found some this afternoon, or rather people who have them. Do you feel like you're being treated like a child?
Not at all. I think it's a very complex issue that even very informed people are struggling with.
I don't think we're being treated like kids. I think that's kind of a step too far. I think we're being treated like people who don't really know what's going on.
The Leave campaign is still behind in the polls, and this was their attempt to tip the balance in their favour. So we do have a slightly clearer picture tonight about what the other side would look like if we were to vote to leave the EU. It would not be in the single market, but we would, they say, have this free trade deal, some sort of free trade deal with the rest of Europe. The big question, I think, for the Leave campaign tonight is this. Why would Europe give us any of it if we weren't prepared to accept the free movement of workers?
All right, Chris Shipp of Westminster, thank you.
At least 28 people have been killed and more than 300 injured in a huge explosion in the Afghan capital, Kabul. A suicide bomber detonated a lorry packed with explosives in the middle of the rush hour. The Taliban said it carried out the attack.
And the former Portuguese police chief who accused Madeleine McCann's parents of faking her abduction has won his appeal in a libel case against them. Gonçalo Amaral was ordered to pay Kate and Gerry McCann €500,000 in damages last year because of claims he made about them in his 2008 book.
There's been an unexpected drop in the number of men being diagnosed with dementia in England. Although rates overall are increasing, scientists say they've been surprised to find 40,000 fewer new cases of the brain disease than predicted. Our science correspondent Alok Jha reports.
We went to Berlin Gap on a holiday and I can remember that clearly. It was so cold at sea.
Gary Whiting was diagnosed with vascular dementia 4 years ago after he suffered a series of strokes. He now needs help from his wife Jackie for everyday tasks like driving, cooking and shopping, which would otherwise be impossible for him.
Losing the skills, money skills, is one of the main day-to-day effects. When I go shopping, Jackie has a heart attack almost because I can't be relied on guessing the right amount of shopping, not spending way too much because I just am not aware of what I am spending.
We've long been told that as the UK's population gets older, we'll see an ever-increasing incidence of cases of dementia. The truth, though, according to research published today, is more complex. Researchers have found a fall in the number of new cases of dementia every year. It was predicted that there would be around 250,000 new cases per year by now, but the new study shows the actual figure is more like 210,000. Overall, that's 20% lower than expected. This line shows previous measurements of the incidence of dementia in people over the age of 65. The new data shows how the number of cases has risen much less. Why this drop has happened is still unclear. Better diet and education and a reduction in smoking in recent decades could all be contributing. Perhaps most interesting, there seems to be a difference between genders.
Age for age, less men are developing dementia each year than in the same age group 20 years ago. In men, there's a reduction of around 40%. In the women, it's effectively roughly the same.
Despite today's positive news, charities caution that we shouldn't forget the 850,000 people in the UK who already suffer from dementia, a number that will keep on rising for some time yet. Alok Jha, ITV News.
Still to come tonight on the ITV Evening News, a special investigation into the growing problem of mobile phones in prisons.
And when Harry met Chewbacca, the princes go behind the scenes at Star Wars. Those stories and more after the break.
Welcome back. New figures obtained by ITV News have highlighted the growing problem of mobile phones used by prisoners in England and Wales. It's been linked to serious crimes, and some of the latest devices are so small they can actually avoid detection. 2 years ago, more than 7,000 phones and SIM cards were seized inside prisons. Last year, it was almost 10,000. Our national editor, Allegra Stratton, was given exclusive access to a prison in Leicestershire to see how authorities there are fighting back.
2 criminals in Salford arranged this escape from their prison van. Using a hidden mobile phone, they alerted accomplices to their route. I'm a criminal! Another mobile inside prison, this time bragging about how prison is fun and Armani trainers. ITV News has been given exclusive access to Stockham Prison in Leicestershire. They're leading the way in trying to find thousands of mobiles hidden in the UK's prisons. In this exercise, sniffer dog Alf is on the scent of chemicals only found in phones.
Good boy.
They have enough time and they're very clever in how they hide it.
One mobile was seized as recently as last week in Stockham. Guards like Dale are on a constant cat and mouse chase.
This one is still shaky, you can still feel the liquid inside. And they've used another tin inside to create a perfect void to hide.
One of the prison's inmates explains the appeal of mobiles.
No word of a lie, I've seen people using Facebook in prison.
When you're in jail, you want to control your life on the outside, and if you're in for drug-related matters, or if you're trying to pervert the course of justice for the benefit of your case, then of course people will try. Yeah.
Prisons rely on this, the body orifice security scanner, or BOSS chair.
So that's the kind of mobile phone that we're finding in prisons at the moment. Obviously very small.
This one was actually found in the prison?
Yes. Yeah, and they're shaped so they can be easily concealable.
But the technology is constantly evolving. Online retailer Amazon even sell a phone called Beat the Boss, explicitly aimed at avoiding detection. Stockholm Prison now also uses this, much more sensitive equipment demonstrated for us by Deputy Governor Naomi Dahl.
And if this is walked past, it goes red, which indicates there's a mobile phone.
For prison staff, it's one of the most pressing issues.
They're also sometimes contacting victims, and if these people have done stuff to these victims and been put away for the crime that they've committed, the victim then wants to be able to feel safe in their own home, and unfortunately that's not the case because they're getting phone calls from the prisoners from behind bars.
ITV News understands the government is challenging mobile phone companies to come up with their own way of blocking signals in prison. If they don't, the government may take steps to jam the service themselves, tricky to do without also blocking local residents. Until a solution is found, mobile phone access to the outside world has changed what it means to be on the inside. Allegra Stratton, ITV News, Stockholm Prison.
Doctors are being urged to consider breaking next week's first ever all-out strike if it's clear patients are being put at risk. The General Medical Council, the doctors' regulator, says it's seriously concerned some hospitals will struggle to cope. Junior doctors, including those in A&E, are planning a 2-day walkout from Tuesday in the row over new contracts. Our health editor, Rachel Younger, is here, so pressure predictably perhaps building on the doctors. Will this change anything, do you think?
Well, I think next week's unprecedented withdrawal of emergency care has always been the one that's weighed heavily on the minds of junior doctors. Their first obligation, of course, as professionals is not to do anything that will harm their patients. However, many of them feel that the contract they are protesting against will do exactly that. They believe it will compromise patient safety. So it's not straightforward. However, every single junior doctor I've spoken to has said in the event of any kind of emergency, they will head straight back into work. Now, their regulator goes significantly further than that, saying, "We believe that despite everyone's best efforts, some hospitals may struggle to cope. In these cases, where local circumstances are particularly acute, the right option may be not to take action." Look, many junior doctors have responded to that by saying, hospitals are struggling every day, and that's the whole point of what we're doing. And indeed, the A&E figures last week bore that out. In part, their union points out they will be covered by more consultants and more senior staff. However, I think when it comes to collective action being taken, doctors take judgments every day, risk assessments, and they will be in contact with those more senior staff. And I think it will come down to individual judgments being taken on the day.
All right, Rachel, thanks very much.
The celebrity at the heart of a privacy row has been given permission to have his appeal heard at the Supreme Court on Thursday. Yesterday, the Court of Appeal ruled that a controversial injunction preventing his identification in England and Wales should be lifted. The story has been reported overseas and online.
A new mural has been unveiled to mark the Queen's 90th birthday. The central London artwork uses an image from her coronation in 1953. There are official celebrations on Thursday, but the Queen will be out in Windsor tomorrow celebrating an even older institution, the 500th anniversary of the Royal Mail.
All this week, we're speaking to other women in their 90s who have no intention of retiring. For the latest in our series, The Queen at 19, and Anna met 93-year-old Jean Miller, who works at a hairdresser's in Glasgow.
Duty calls once more for Jean Miller. Up bright and early to prepare herself to meet and greet the public. That means making sure she looks her best. Unlike the Queen, 3 years her junior, Jean has to drive herself to work, an hour-long journey from her home in Falkirk to Glasgow in rush-hour traffic, a trip she makes on her own 3 times a week.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Jean works front of house for Vidal Sassoon, employed at the city centre hair salon when she was 75.
I've always worked, you know. You just go on, you don't think you're 93. There's so little I've done except work, you know. Isn't that right?
Would you be bored if you were at home?
Yes. And you haven't cut off yet? Yes. When I take you around there.
Jean's job is to look after the customers and to manage the cloakroom. She's on her feet all day, but that's nothing compared to the Queen, she says.
I keep looking at her walking down these steps and I think I wish I could do that because she, without holding on, she walks down these and doesn't she work hard? She does. I mean, there's bound to be days when she could say, oh, blow it all. I just want to sit here and read the paper.
You must have days like that as well.
Sometimes when I get up and think, oh no, what am I doing this for? But then once you do a shower and you're back and on your road and when you come in here, you're fine, absolutely fine. And she'll be the same, I suppose. He likes to be down here.
And so, like the Queen, she is determined to do her job to the best of her ability, she says, no matter how hard that is.
I have here, my hips are away, my knees. My hands are stiff sometimes, but that's all part of it, isn't it?
Nina Nanar, ITV News in Glasgow.
Fantastic. Finally, the Queen's grandsons, Princes William and Harry, are expected to be among the guests at a special family dinner at Windsor Castle on Thursday. Today, though, they were celebrating the phenomenal success of Star Wars with a visit to Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire.
Yes, the princes, who are huge fans of the films, couldn't resist a duel when they were shown the famous lightsabers. Both survived unscathed, thank goodness, to meet some of the film stars and found time for a hug with Chewbacca, all 7'6" of him. Will we see it?
We will.
There it is.
Oh.
That's it for now. Tom Bradby will be here at 10.
But from the team here, have a great evening. Bye-bye.